So today we are going to go through setting up a creative testing campaign and going through all the settings that I use and how I like to test creatives, how I'm structuring my creative test specifically, and going through setting up one exactly because there's a lot of settings, a lot of things that Meta has introduced, and this is where I've seen the best results. Again, managing multiple hundreds of $1,000s per month on Meta. First thing is obviously clicking create and clicking sales. Again, depending on your objective, either it's going to be sales, obviously conversions or leads. Again, it doesn't really matter. I almost exclusively use sales. And then what we're going to do next is you're going to go into the campaign name, again making sure everything is all right here to set up your campaign name. It's super important that we also have a creative testing campaign as a name. Just make it very clear. Obviously this probably will sound a bit silly to you, but after you're adding more campaigns, more ad sets, making sure we are maintaining a right kind of taxonomy really makes sense. Now, then we're gonna go and we don't want catalog ads. Again, this is only for like dynamic product catalog campaigns or prospecting campaigns as well there. So I'll probably leave it off for this specific occasion. And then you will see Advanced Plus on. Now I like to have my creative testing campaign optimizing budget on an ad set level. So all the budget sits under each individual ad set, which allows basically for control over the spend, control over the specific tests that I'm doing, and really controlling. This is, I think, one of the key advantages of having an ad set budget optimization here is once you obviously start increasing your creative output and you have multiple tests running, you probably see a few winning. You can easily increase the spend vertically on each individual ad set, whereas on a CBO perspective, yes, you can increase the budget on a campaign level and probably that ad set will get most of the spend, but you're also increasing the spend on some of the other ad sets and you can't really basically isolate the winning ads there. Obviously this campaign is not for scaling, but I like to scale when we see good performance. I think this is a good practice. But apart from that, the main thing that we get with ad set budget optimization is that we get control over each testing variable, which basically means that we can set a specific hypothesis, test those ad sets, those ads, test those ads, and then go back into the drawing board, review the creative testing that we've done, and really isolate spend. Whereas on the CBO scenario, it's a bit unlikely that most of the assets that will get spent and definitely not get significant data to really have that creative feedback loop going. Now you will see here, this is a relatively new option. Share some of your budget with other ad sets. We'll set 20% of your budget with other ad sets within the campaign, which likely to improve performance, which is basically a CBO setup. I like to leave it as clicked off. Again, just to go back a bit, because obviously maybe that sounded maybe too dogmatic. I'm not saying that obviously you can't really have a successful creative testing campaign using CBO budget. It's more so at those higher level of scales I've seen is really making sure that we put enough budget and enough data through each creative test is super important so we can optimize the whole creative process. And that's where CBO it can get quite tricky. I love CBO, but for like mostly for scaling. Now, I don't want to do any ABO test. Now, this is super important here that we add. Obviously, this is just a dummy account for YouTube, basically. But I'll put a screenshot here so you can see this. Basically, make sure, and this is so important, make sure you add your audience segment reporting, which basically means adding some of the lists that you have, some of the audiences to signal Meta, basically to give Meta as much data as possible to reach out potential customers, but also to give it enough data to but also exclude some of those existing customers, right? We don't want to spend money on reaching the same kind of people that already have purchased from us and are already warm. So it's super important that we do this. How we can do this is if you go to audience segments, you pop another tab and you can go to engage audience. Here's what I like to use is some kind of engaged audiences. Probably going to be engagers from your socials, maybe some auto cards, maybe some email openers, maybe some email lists, that kind of stuff. And then just customers, basically people who have actually purchased your product. So the more the better. What I do is I sync my Klaviyo, and then it's all the customers basically that I actually went into, and I just adding them here. But also you can also create like a pixel audience as well. I like to have both. This is how you do it. It's very simple. Just click confirm, and then you have all the segments ready and done. Now, special categories, again, this is going to be for special categories, so I'm not going to go too detailed. So let's go into the ad set level. So the name here, again, depending on what exactly you want to do. So the name here would also depend on what exactly you want to do and how you kind of have your own ways. But I like to put like the broad, which is typically what I like to use. Everything is on broad, which we are going to cover in a bit. So I don't like to do any interest targeting, any lookalike targeting, anything like that. This is used to work, 5 years ago. Now it doesn't work. Meta needs to get as much data, and we need to give it as much room as possible to find our customers, right? So we need to leave it broad. Now, if you're a brand new account, maybe testing an interest tag won't hurt unless it's like very, very broad stacked and very broad audiences still. But for now, just keeping things broad. Again, I like to mess a bit with the kind of age, and then obviously maybe it's like UK, and maybe then I'm testing a specific thing, which maybe is going to be statics, and there's going to be, let's say, price like angle. So as you can see, I have identified, obviously it's not an in-depth creative testing strategy video, but I have other videos which you can see here. You can will have some links, but basically the idea is here is we want one specific hypothesis, one thing that we are learning from each individual ad set. Now here we're going to get a bit tricky, so please pay attention. So here's when you here's when it may get a bit tricky. Obviously, conversion location, always website, unlike website, an in-store website, an app, a website course, just website, which is basically what we are when we want to optimize. Now, in case you're a business optimized for like leads, I still recommend using lead forms on the website itself. Or having specific landing pages for that, or you can use the in-app lead form, which is again on the lead optimization campaign. So you may need to just change that. But yeah, I rarely do anything else. Again, message destinations and stuff is I think for like mostly service businesses. So most of the time it's gonna be website basically. Now this is super important. Maximize the number of conversions or maximize the value of conversions, and a few other goals that it doesn't even worth mentioning, because I highly recommend you never use any of those two. So if you are a brand new account, or you are maybe spending like 20-30K a month, I'll recommend maximizing the number of conversions, which basically means it will say to Meta, find me the lowest cost per conversion, which is what we want, right? We want to build up the pixel. We want to drive as much conversion as possible, and we want to do this in the most efficient way. Now, when you start scaling, we have seen recently some very, very solid performance by maximizing the value of conversions, which basically is going to signal to Meta, give me the highest value customers that you can get out there. You may need to find them at like a higher cost, but I want their most valuable customers. Those who probably have a bit high AOV, which kind of offsets the kind of high cost per acquisition as well. So that's the kind of the tricky one. Now, in general, what I do is I optimize for number of conversions. Even if the target is going to be ROAS, I still optimize for the maximize for number of conversions. What I use value is mostly on like scaling and mostly on like the proven ads. But again, if you have data and you have a subs account, you can also test that. Now, make sure you obviously use your kind of pixel. You use purchase, obviously as an event, not going to complete registration. And yeah, cost per result goal. I never use it on testing. I'm also using when scaling, just because I still think Meta needs data to know which ad is going to be performing the best. So I don't want to restrict it. Now, if I'm spending $1 million a month and I'm launching, multiple tens of tests per month, I may test having backup just to preserve and protect budgets and protect efficiency. But I think this is a way more advanced. I wouldn't recommend it, and I think you can just go with maximum volume and it should be fine. Now, value rules, again, this is one when you're optimizing for value, you can basically have specific rules. So for example, pause an ad if it doesn't, if it spends like £200 and it doesn't deliver 2x ROAS. Now, I rarely do this just because I'm hands-on, and I think it just, there's multiple things that we need to take a look at now, just besides just the ads manager to make a decision. So I don't really like the rules basically. Now, attribution model also very, very important. But this specific setting, whether you use standard or incremental, again, this is more advanced. If you're just sending out or you're spending less than 100k or 100 to 300k, or if you're spending less than 300k per month, I just probably going to use standard. Incremental is basically you're optimizing delivery for incremental conversions using models that predict whether conversion is caused by an ad, which basically means is like we're now saying to Meta, find me the find me conversions that are incremental to my business. So basic conversions that are actually have being converted by an ad and not just, based on the engagement or based someone actually sees an ad. Is very, very hard attributed to my revenue, which is great, but you need to have a lot of data, and it's something that I'm still testing, to be honest, because it's relatively new and I still opt for the standard for now. So I wouldn't worry too much about it yet. If you are on those high level spends, I think worth a test, but mostly again with proven ads. So I wouldn't do this on a creative testing campaign. Now, budget, super important. People get it quite mixed here. The higher, the better, because you're gonna get faster data. You're gonna get learnings faster, so you can A, execute from a creative process perspective, but B, also optimize and just pause a test that doesn't work very, very fast. Now, obviously, there is the other spectrum here where we just want to protect efficiency, especially on like tests that we don't really know if they're gonna work. Now, what I like to shoot on a daily budget perspective is 3 to 4 times the OV, roughly, depending on how many ads as we have as well. So if I have like a £50 AOV, I like to put it at like 150, for example. And this is just giving enough to like Meta basically to find customers and optimize effectively. Now, I know maybe for some of those earlier kind of stages, it may be a little bit hard. This is where you need to just consolidate as much as possible and give it again a Meta as much spend as possible, right? But I completely get that. You can even go to 100. The idea is that you're gonna get data a lot slower, and obviously makes you to factor that in when you're optimizing. So you can't expect optimizing within 3 days if you're spending like $100, whereas if you're spending 200, for example, you're gonna get the data much faster, basically. Now, in terms of schedule, again, I'm not really doing anything else. Oh, another thing that is very important is attribution settings, which is really important. What I like to do is go 7-day click only. So I pause this one and I pause this one as well, which essentially what it means is I'm only getting conversions from someone who's actually clicked on my ad, because what Meta does is just claim sort of the conversion without actually converting. Maybe someone sees an ad, which again is it's a very tricky topic, right? And it's very hard to say which is the best. However, I really like to make sure it's as incremental as possible. And the only way that I'm using, and obviously this is something to kind of test as well, but the only way that I like to, the only time that I like to use 7-day click one day view is either have a much newer account. I'm talking about like zero spend, where you want to obviously start getting, maximum data back to Meta, or you're scaling very, very hard, like 300-400k per month, where it is we can see some benefit of obviously having that view through conversion come in, because obviously not all the people actually just click on an ad, so we want to maximize the pool, right? But I think anyway in the between, if you're spending like more than 20 to like 400-500k per month, I'll probably see to 7-day click. Again, some also test. Generally, 7-day click is just much safer option right there. Now the delivery style, just leave it standard. Obviously, you can't really change that. Of this space self-explanatory. And now you're gonna probably have Advanced Plus audience zones, which is basically the Advanced Plus shopping campaign that it was. Now, okay with this when you're scaling. Now, I'm okay with this unless you obviously have some specific demographic. So what I like to do is obviously go to some more controls. First of all, exclude my customers, which we also previously added here. Super important, obviously your location. And then if you want to go again and have more specific like things that you're very hard on, for example, having just only male or like only 30 plus, again, you can manually select it here. So you can see here Meta doesn't really like this. So you have multiple options to choose here. But so you can basically do what it has now, where basically just Meta does whatever it wants. Two is basically we tell which audiences we think is going to be best, but Meta still optimizes for what it sees actually perform the best, or what it sees it would likely perform the best. And ways here where we just force basically our own options, so we can potentially hold like 30, or we just have only males here. So there's a lot of things that like you get a lot of boxes just trying to get you back to the advanced plus audience. Again, I generally recommend using advanced plus audience. Again, it is Meta that we want to just lean on. But again, if you are really focusing on one specific, like if you really want to just target 30 plus, you need to go with a manual setup unless you want to just give Meta a bit more room. Now, I think that's pretty much it here. I don't do anything like intro targeting, like I said, so there's not too much to say here. In terms of placements, now I generally leave them on advanced zone, although I would say that I don't like the Meta delivering to the audience network and all this kind of more low quality quote unquote placements. So again, I might also go ahead in placements and just delete these ones. I probably most of the time leave those on, but in any case, you can also do that. But most of the time, it's just full on delivery. It really depends, it's up to you. And then we go into the ad level, which is very interesting to be honest. Now we go then into the ad level, which is again super interesting as well. Now when you obviously click again, same logic, probably gonna be static. Again, let's say that I have price led and I have my V1 here, for example. Obviously, this will be also a bit more detailed, but just so you know. Now, the first option you'll see is partnership ads. This is only when you are partnering with obviously an influencer or a creator, and obviously you have a code and you want to run ads through their profile. I'm not gonna go through that setup. Probably gonna do a separate video for that because obviously most of the time it's gonna be through your branded page or IG account. And then what you're gonna do is manual upload single image or video. I like to don't select multi advertiser ads. I just see like Meta just trying to force more delivery into places that I just don't think they will actually convert. So I just leave it off. Now my destination is going to be website. Obviously, enter your kind of website here, and it's super important. This is I can't stress how important this is because it's so easy to just leave this on, right? If you go to edit here, you'll see Meta having this toggled on now on most accounts as a default. Optimize website destinations, which basically means Meta will just send traffic to whatever page you have on your website, thinking that it will kind of tailor the experience for each individual customer, which in theory makes a lot of sense, right? But again, I have multiple pages when I'm sending traffic from the homepage to different products. I just don't want Meta to just spend money on things that I know they won't work. So have one dedicated funnel, and please pause this off and toggle this off. Same probably on SOAP. If you have SOAP, I've seen when business have SOAP as well, it's also toggled on. So again, I probably want to all to be off here. Now it's going to setting up the actual image ad. So for example, say that I'm using, let's say I use this one, which is one of my ads. Now I always recommend having 9x16 as well here, so you have full 9x16 experience. But again, this is not the most important thing. Obviously, put your primary description, everything here. This is always good to see. Now you'll be encountered with like way too many AI options. Now this is a bit of a gray area, right? Because as you can see here, it has some generated AI images. Some of those potentially are not too bad, are potentially like like to test it. This is up to you, depending on like, do you have a good creative process down? You probably won't need this, right? Or you will probably do this just specifically on another new ad set just with AI, right? I'm not gonna mingle my creatives with AI because again, I'm not sure what's working, right? So basically, I'm saying just don't have anything selected unless you want to test it on a specific ad set, just with what Meta is proposing here. So I'll skip it, continue, and then you get this pop up, which is obviously even more creative enhancements. Again, I'm not a fan at the moment, and I would like to have more control over what my delivery of my ad would be. So I like to have everything off, basically, because I've seen this being quite funky when delivering ads. So I just don't want to have this. Now, again, up for testing. Just make sure to have a quick preview because most of the time it's just some of the settings just doesn't make sense for your own business, right? So we click done, and there you have it. Basically, you will see here the related media. 10 media is being used to this ad. Make sure you click this one. It's basically all the images that we went through before that. If you go down, you'll see zero media is being used. If you go scroll down, you will see some of the enhancements that we post. Make sure it's zero if you don't want any of the creative enhancements. I like to not have anything. And then you have it basically. This is pretty much it. How I'm setting up my creative testing campaign, how I'm testing each creative ad and each creative test, so I can make the most amount of data and make the best out of Meta basically and those recent settings, and give you basically the most optimized settings to gather more creative learning, so you can optimize to gather more leads, more purchases, and to essentially making sure we are making learnings and we are collecting data fast, and we're giving also Meta the room to make those to actually gather data and have those new creative winners that we're then going to promote into a core campaign. That was a beautiful day. I hope you really enjoyed it. And if you want to get more resources from my end, how I'm testing, scaling, and obviously if you want to work with me one-to-one, there's also option for that. Obviously, be limited in terms of the availability. So make sure you click on the link and follow the next steps there, and hopefully we can chat soon. Thanks a lot, and I hope you see you on the next video.